The wind whistles. The sound of children crying echoes in the void. The sound of chewing in the darkness. There are people who die carrying resentment. There are souls who do not want to be liberated. They just want to be full. And when hunger comes from beyond death, it does not call the name of a stranger, but calls its own flesh and blood from its own little grandchildren. If you are near a house of mourning, do not sleep too soundly, for it is possible, in the middle of the night, that some body will creep down to find a familiar meal. And now, let me go into the story of the old woman who died and came back to life and ate her own daughter. In Zabnuj village, a small remote village in the middle of the northwest jungle, covered in mist all year round, and shady, like the heart of the person, there is a grandmother named Niam Pog Netsum. She lives with her children and grandchildren for 3 generations in an old stilt house, covered with vines and the smell of old smoke. Since her youth, she had been famous as the keeper of ancient secrets, the sacred rituals of the Hmong people that no one dared to mention casually. But as she grew older, she became more and more quiet and strange. One night, people found her sitting by the fire, her knees drawn up, holding a handful of dry human hair, whispering in a language that no one could understand, only the sound of the wind passing through the mountain crevices. Then one moonless day, she died suddenly, as light as a falling leaf. No illness, no last words. Her descendants held a funeral according to ancient customs. Her body was hung from the rafters with wild orchid vines. A white chicken was slaughtered, and the shaman played a black flute for 3 days and 3 nights, praying for her soul to be led to the land of the ancestors. However, on the second night, when the sounds of the flute gradually faded, the old people lay exhausted under their blankets, and the children slept soundly in the fumes of corn wine. Something strange began to seep into the night. From the corner of the house, where the firelight couldn't reach, came a rustling, clattering sound, like someone gnawing at a spine. A 6-year-old girl, her granddaughter, who was sleeping in her mother's arms, suddenly disappeared. No one knew how. Her mother woke up in the middle of the night, thinking she had gone to the bathroom, but called out to her, but got no response. The cousin, about 15 years old, walked gropingly with an oil lamp. The wind outside suddenly stopped. The oil lamp flickered, and in the dark corner of the house, where people placed the rice bowl to worship the grandmother, he saw a horror. He froze. Before his eyes was his grandmother's body, no longer hanging from the beam, but squatting like a hungry animal. Her eyes were white and rolling constantly. The stench of death permeated every pore. Her hands clutched her niece's body, her skin was still warm and her head was stuck to her mouth like a bitten apple. Blood dripped onto the wooden floor, leaving dark streaks. The body was not rotten. Her skin was still wrinkled, as in life, but stiff as rotten wood. Her eyes were white, the irises had melted into milk, but they were still fixed on her cousin, as if they could see through his heart. Her tongue was long and purple, hanging over her chin, oozing a thick black mucus like rotten oil. Long matted hair hung in clumps over his face, half intact with its familiar wrinkles, half distorted, stretched like rubber, with patches of cracked skin exposing his jawbone. Blood dripped steadily from her lips, drip, drip, forming a puddle on the floor. But the most terrifying thing was, the chewing sound continued, crackling, crunching, as if in her mouth were young cartilage. Soft bones, her soul being crushed. The older brother stepped back reflexively, his foot stepping on something soft. It was his sister's tiny hand, now only the elbow part remaining. Grandma suddenly raised her head. Her neck creaked like wood being twisted the wrong way. A foul-smelling breath came out of her mouth and went straight into his nose. Her lifeless white eyes blinked once, very slowly, and then her mouth opened wide, reaching to her ears. A mouth no longer human, filled with jagged teeth like a wild dog's, pointing in all directions, curving down like claws. He wanted to scream, but his throat was blocked. He wanted to run, but his legs were frozen like stone. In the howling wind outside, Only one sound persisted: crack, swish, swish. Then he fell, unconscious, into darkness as thick as her blood. The next morning, the funeral becomes a bloody feast. It was not yet dawn. The dew was still thick on every tree branch and blade of grass when the first scream rang out from the funeral home. In a moment, the whole village of Zabnuj was plunged into panic. 2 nieces, a niece dead, a nephew missing. The cousin was found on the floor, unconscious, his face pale as if he had seen a ghost, unable to speak. The village elders immediately gathered, bringing incense and charms. They discovered dried bloodstains stretching from the funeral home to the backyard, where Nyampog Netsam grew medicinal leaves, a sacred plant used in soul-calling rituals and opening the gates for ghosts. But the garden was now torn apart. The damp red earth rose up in jagged patches. The dabschwaj plants had been uprooted, their trunks broken in two, their roots bleeding as if they had been bitten off. A suffocating stench filled the air. Her body was lowered and placed back in the coffin. But everyone noticed. Her belly was abnormally swollen, hard as a rock, as if it contained something that did not belong to a human being. The smell of long-fermented human flesh, mixed with the smell of cold earth, was strong. A young, brave shaman used a sacrificial knife to try to cut open her belly. Everyone held their breath. A sizzling sound rang out. Black blood spurted out, smoke rising thinly, like morning mist. Then from the slit, a small hand, the skin still warm, the fingernails covered in fresh blood, reached out, groping as if searching for a way out. An old woman fainted. The crowd rushed to run. Her funeral, instead of a farewell to the dead, became a blood ceremony, marking a night when the gates were opened for the devil to rise. Nyampog Netsam's body was hastily buried in an unprecedented exorcism in Zabnuj village. People sprinkled white salt around the grave, burned amulet ash mixed with tangled hair, and chanted spells to dispel the evil spirit for 3 hours. Even the shaman trembled, saying that her path to the ancestral land had been cut off. But on the 3rd night, the sound of children echoed through the village again, broken, cold cries that seemed to come from the bowels of the earth. Someone heard footsteps dragging across the yard, stopping outside the chicken coop, causing the animals to fall deathly silent. Then a familiar figure appeared in front of someone's porch. An old woman, bent over, her hair disheveled, her mourning clothes stained with mud. Her mouth was still chewing slowly, patiently, as if she was never full, and from her chin, blood was still dripping, drop by drop, bright red, onto the cold ground. The villagers gradually left. The houses were empty, the wooden walls rotted. Only the sound of wind blowing through bamboo and the sound of chickens flapping their wings in the middle of the night remained. Zabnuj village disappeared from the map as if it had never existed, remaining only in whispers at the market. Do not bury people whose souls are unknown. Do not let the dead have no one to send them off with sincerity. And if one night you hear a baby crying outside your window, footsteps dragging across the brickyard, and see a figure standing silently on the porch, what would you do? Would you dare to open the door? Or would you stay away from the following? Don't sleep next to the recently deceased. Don't burn incense during the hour of the tiger. And absolutely, don't answer when someone calls your name 3 times in the night, because who knows, the thing calling you might not be human anymore.